from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
Quarterback stories taking center stage in Week 11 of the Canadian Football League. Disappointment in BC. There are questions in Toronto and in the nation's capital. What a feel-good story. After being relieved a month ago, Chris Jones rises again. And was his foot in or was it out? This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. Appreciate you watching and listening week after week. I'm Bubba O'Neil. As we tend to do and we work hard to do, we always surround ourselves with the best in the business. And today, I'm actually really loving our guest. Well, he was so strong earlier this season, we certainly had to have him back from Sportsnet 960, the fan in Calgary. Matt Rose, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here, guys. Thank you very much.
Hey, also from Sportsnet, pleased to say welcome back to journalist and Argonauts reporter, boo, David Morassutti. Got to throw that boo in there, Argo fan.
I appreciate it. Appreciate
Plus, you got to ring that rookie bell one more time. Hard to believe this is the first appearance on the CFL This Week from TSN veteran, Vancouver reporter, CFL insider, and play-by-play announcer, Farhan Lalji. Farhan, thanks for joining us, partner.
Thanks for having me on. God, I've been trying to get on this show forever.
Glad to have you on. Hey, let's get right down to business. Little time, so much to talk about. Hey, I want to throw this right at you, Farhan, to start out. It really was the story. You kind of broke the story earlier this week, or earlier last week when it all happened. But after one game through, were unfair expectations placed on quarterback Nathan Rourke in his return to turn the Lions around?
Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, look, like, what is unfair expectations? And when I say that, I think there was a lot of excitement Nathan Rourke was back, but I don't know that anybody really thought he was going to rip it up. I'm sure there were some that thought he would instantly snap his fingers and get back to 2022, but Winnipeg's a good defense. There's no doubt about it. Was I surprised that he played as poorly as he did? Absolutely. But I certainly didn't expect him to wind the clock back. I thought it was going to take some time. And so I think people have a tendency to confuse excitement with expectation. And the fact that he came back, you know, we got to talk about whether or not we felt he still should have been in the NFL. I certainly was fairly strong in my assessment of the player. And so, you know, people take that and you assume that means you think he's going to dominate his first time onto the field. So if you thought he was, then yeah, I guess your expectations were unfair. But I did think it was going to take some time. And I know there are many that are just still excited he's back.
Matt, certainly was the game of the week. I think we were all very interested in what we were going to see. What did you see through your lens?
One of the things that stood out to me was, like you mentioned, that there was just some rust to shake off. You know, it kind of it maybe encapsulates the real differences between, you know, what NFL preparation is and what CFL regular season is. Obviously, you have the difference in the rules and coming back up here and 3 days of practice as well. I know there hasn't been a ton of changes in that Lions locker room and coaching staff since he left, but at the same time, it's a lot of expectations for the guy. For me, this is a Winnipeg team that has a veteran defense that has been continuously getting better as the season has gone on. And I think that was also a part of it. You kind of got to tip your hat to some of the veterans over there in Winnipeg who did a good job in making the return maybe a little bit less exciting than it was led to be throughout the course of the week. But at the same time, I don't think I'm worried that Nathan Rourke is going to come back to this league, and that's what we're going to see for the rest of his CFL career. To me, that was just a little bump on the road for a guy who's coming back and doing just a little bit of a different type of competition here.
You know, David, it's kind of interesting to think that Matt brings up an interesting angle to this, is that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers had to have been hearing the noise all week about where the focus was going to be, and they quietly just went about their business.
Yeah, Willie Jefferson made it a point to say, like, they knew that this week was all about Nathan Rourke kind of coming back, and what a better fuel for a defense, right, to show that, you know, they could stop him, right? And so it doesn't take much to motivate players, especially guys on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So I wouldn't say that it was all, you know, that was the only reason why. I think it, you know, just kind of a perfect storm. And I mean, the Blue Bombers have been proving the last few weeks that defense is going to be one of the tougher ones to get through for the rest of the year. They just found that ingredient that has just made them so tough to go up against.
Guys, for me, I'll tell you this, though. I do wonder how much of it was Winnipeg, who I give full respect to, and how much of it was BC. And I say that because Calgary, which is an ordinary defense, had no problem shutting BC down and basically laid the exact same blueprint and game plan as Winnipeg executed in back-to-back games. And Edmonton defensively is pretty ordinary. And they had, look, Jake Dolegala played in that game. But you got 4 straight games now for the BC Lions where their offense has been absolutely dormant. So, again, full marks to Winnipeg because even they've won just the 2 games against BC, 2 games in a row, I should say. But before that, even in losses, their D was playing better. But I do think some of this is just the Lions offense, after having been brilliant for 6 games, hitting a huge rut that they've got to find a way to figure themselves out of as well.
Well, hold on, Farhan. Like, what is that? I mean, we just saw him in Hamilton. We saw BC in Hamilton, and they could not have been any better. Like, that was almost as close to perfect as we could see, and it had been building and building and building. In fact, we're talking about MOPs for maybe 3 guys on the Lions offense. Like, what's happened, according from what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, in that game against Hamilton, that was half Hamilton just being awful, especially in the back end, right? I mean, let's be fair there too. I know it's a Hamilton show, but BC was really good all the way through, including that game. And I think Calgary just decided, look, we are going to not attempt to pressure Vernon. We're going to spy Vernon, and we're just going to put a lot of guys in coverage, right? And we're going to specifically take away certain routes, whether it's the deep ball from Alex Hollins, whether it's the bender from Justin McInnes, and we're going to see if they can find some things. And they struggle to find some things. And the one thing about BC is, Jordan McSimmick's a good offensive coordinator, but Jordan McSimmick also has to realize that sometimes it's not important to win games your way. It's just important to win games. And I think there are some simple things that BC just doesn't do offensively. They just don't feel comfortable calling certain plays when they're not, or they feel they're not equipped. So when you see a team like Montreal just decide to win first down by running every form of screen game known to mankind, or flip it forward for a jet sweep, or things like that, the Lions don't do the simple stuff. They just don't do the simple stuff. The simple stuff for the Lions might be to run a hitch route, when there's bigger concepts down the field and teams are playing deep and over the top and trying to take that away. But that's just not how McSimmick wants to call the game. Now, he's slowly committed a little more to the run game in the last 2, right? And hopefully they continue to do that if they want to get out of this funk. But if they want to push the ball down the field, they're going to need to find a way to take some of the simple stuff to draw DBs up, not just linebackers up in play action. But so for me, I just think teams have taken the approach of, we're going to force you to be patient. It's Rich Stubler style football, and we're going to force you to play small ball. And the Lions simply hate doing that. That's just not in their DNA. But right now they're losing games because they're not willing to adjust. And at some point, they've got to be willing to adjust if they want to come back to how they want to play later in the season.
Matt, I got to say this. Look, the Lions aren't saying this, but I will say this. I cannot believe he was acquired and made the highest paid player in the league for next season because they want Nathan Rourke to be on the bench. When Vernon Adams comes, is there going to be a quarterback controversy? I wouldn't even say controversy, but is there going to be pressure on them to maybe, if Nathan doesn't play well, to go to VA?
I think you have to. You have to at least have the conversation. Vernon Adams has had a great start to the season. Obviously, the injury has kind of hampered the numbers, and the 6,000 yards passing season is out of reach at this point. But if Nathan Rourke doesn't start to show improvements, which I would expect, like I said, I think he's going to start to kind of get the hang of things and get back to the guy that we saw light this league on fire before he left for the NFL. But at the same time, Vernon does offer a couple of different things. He is kind of the cagier vet. In this league, I think you love to have a couple of options, especially because we've seen teams, lose their main starting quarterback and just kind of nosedive your season. We've talked about it here in Calgary. One of the key things about Jake Maier isn't that he's necessarily going to go out and win you every game, but at least he's available. And if you're in BC and you've got both those guys as options right now, you're in a pretty good spot. You're up near the top of the division. Obviously, controversy can occur, but it depends on how both these guys handle it as professionals. So you would prefer to have options, I think, Farhan?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, there's no doubt they'll go back to Vernon. And look, big picture, this is Nathan Rourke, 2025 and beyond. But in 2024, they're going to do whatever it takes to win now. And these two quarterbacks genuinely like each other. Like, I lived Casey Printers versus Dave Dickinson, right? And that was disgusting. Like, it was awful. It tore the locker room apart. That will not happen this time because these two guys genuinely like each other. And the other thing is that this is Vernon Adams' team. And no matter how much everybody in the BC Lions locker room thinks of Nathan Rourke as a player and everybody league-wide, believe me, this is Vernon Adams' team. So if you want to create a controversy, you won't be legitimate about it. As long as the Lions staff, they say we believe in Vernon, I know the players believe in Vernon. So if Nathan doesn't improve and they don't go back to Vernon, then the coaching staff would be responsible for a divided locker room or a quarterback controversy. As long as the coaching staff deals with this legitimately, I can assure you both players will. The players are not going to create drama. But, like when the day Nathan got signed, I talked to some players on that team and they said, I don't know how to feel, right? Like, I didn't play with Nathan. Vernon's my guy. Like, I've done certain things with Vernon. So while they don't dislike Nathan and they don't blame Nathan for anything, they're comfortable running with Vernon. So if Nathan plays well and everybody rolls with it, even when Vernon comes back, everyone will be fine. If Nathan struggles and they play Vernon, everyone will be fine. If Nathan struggles and they don't play Vernon, then they run the risk of affecting the room. And I don't think they'll do that because I do think the coaches have faith in Vernon. Like, Rick Campbell will tell you till he's blue in the face, and he'll mean it, just how important of a teammate Vernon Adams is. And even Nathan has said legitimately, he's the leader I aspire to be. So just be real about it. And when Nathan's struggling and when Vernon's healthy, you have to play Vernon, and I think they will.
And it's fascinating the way that this is a team that's won to start the season, right? Like, imagine if they had been a losing team, how much different this conversation would be. But Vernon's the guy that got you to this point where you're top of the Western Division, essentially.
But he also struggled, right? Like, he did struggle for 2 games before this happened, right? So I think both teams are both quarterbacks are in a situation where just play and you'll stay, right? Like, perform and we'll keep going. And no one's going to be upset about it. But if you don't perform, give the other guy an opportunity and no one's going to be upset about it. If Nathan Rourke gets sat down for a period of time for Vernon Adams, Nathan Rourke's going to live with it because he'll know it's because I wasn't doing my part.
Last thing on this, David, to you. Were you surprised to see Nathan so, I guess, visually sort of frustrated? Like, he looked upset on the sideline. There were some moments of frustration. I thought he was upset. Were you, again, we talk about expectations, but I know obviously he puts a lot of pressure on himself. Obviously, we hear every athlete say that. But were you surprised?
I wasn't surprised. I mean, he's a competitor. All competitors they always have these expectations of, how they think they're going to be able to handle certain situations, right? But, like, you got to think of this probably also combines what he's been through the last few months, right? Trying to land a job in the NFL. Now he's back in BC, a place he's comfortable, place that he kind of feels like he's at his best, and he wasn't. So, and look, you heard him after the game too, kind of apologize. Right? How often do you hear an athlete kind of apologize for a performance that they deem unworthy, right? So I just think a lot of that, it kind of just built throughout the game, and it's tough, right? And you don't want to see a quarterback feel that frustrated, but it just also shows the level of, how much he cares and how much he wants to finally have a situation for himself that he can show who he really is.
Yeah, guys, and as a guy that's watched him pretty closely, I was surprised. And I say that because, people look at Nathan Rourke and they think his superpower is his ability to process quickly and at a level we just haven't seen in this league. But really his superpower, in my opinion, in 2022 is his ability to not get frustrated and to just keep chopping wood. And if, you go back to an early season game against Winnipeg that BC lost, games later in the year against Saskatchewan, Calgary, and Ottawa, where they were losing, and he was turning the ball over. And he really, really had this next play mentality. He never showed a level of frustration. He kept chopping wood, eventually found a way, figured it out, and threw for 400 yards and would win those games. So to see him frustrated surprised me. But I'll tell you, I also saw that same look in that fourth quarter against Atlanta, or with Atlanta in the preseason, which I was just like, wow, okay. And there were some circumstances around that, which I found out after the fact, that he showed that frustration. I almost think there was a bit of a carryover 1 week later into this game. But just the frustration I saw, I've never seen from him. And he needed to beat himself up less post-game because there was just, as you said off the top, Bubba, just unreal expectations. Rick Campbell talked about what he's been through in 7 days just to get there and get on the field. He needed to give himself a little more grace, and I hope the fact that he took it so hard doesn't carry over.
Guys, in Hamilton, yet another 30-plus point, in fact, into the 40s, in what was allowed in last week's loss to the Edmonton Elks. And the move at defensive coordinator has been made. Chris Jones rises again. Matty, do you think that now that he's just focused on being a defensive coordinator, that this could be a good fit for him? And what do you think he would offer the Tiger Cats in terms of being that guy that's going to lead a defense on a team that right now is on the edge of, basically your season being over?
I've only really dealt with Chris Jones when he's kind of been the visitor here in Calgary, so I don't really know how he's going to handle this switch from being a head coach to a defensive assistant. Obviously, it's something that we've seen him kind of do before, move between the league, hold these other positions, kind of manage these different positions among the CFL and kind of move along between. He's got some connections in Hamilton, so it makes sense. This is a season that has gone not well for the Tiger Cats, right? Like that's pretty obvious. And anytime you can bring someone in that you think is going to help you, CFL teams are going to try and do it. Obviously, with Chris Jones getting fired and all that type of thing, he becomes available. He's probably still getting some money from Edmonton. So I wasn't shocked, I'll say that he showed up again in the league. But at the same time, how much difference is he necessarily going to make as the defensive assistant or the title that they've given him? I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to see week to week, that it's going to be all of a sudden this is a stout Hamilton team that's only given up a couple of field goals and that type of thing. But surprised, not even close to surprised that here he is back in the CFL, because just can't seem to quit it, man.
David, you kind of saw a similar situation with the Argonauts where he kind of came in as this sort of interim guy that's going to run a defense. And I don't know why they just haven't called him. I mean, I don't know if that's a Chris Jones thing that he wants to be called the senior or whatever, blah, blah, blah. He's going to be calling plays for the Tiger Cats. Let's who's fooling who here. But what did in his experience, that sort of half season with the Argonauts, did he make an effect?
Yes and no. I mean, that was a team that was dealing with, a coach that was, there were COVID protocols and things like that. They just had to think quickly. And, there was Chris Jones waiting and available for him. We saw it in Edmonton. There were the issues were defensively. There were a little bit of that in Toronto too. Like, this isn't just the Edmonton thing wasn't just new for Chris Jones. So I do think, he's just a veteran guy. He knows there's going to be expectations. He's going to, expect things right away. But I also think that there's been a little bit of a learning pattern, and we know the history with him and Milanovic, right? Like, they go way back. So there's a level of comfort there, and probably just knowing what the expectations are. That's going to be set right from the bat. So I think that will help in this situation with Hamilton, is that the expectations has been there before in the past with that working relationship prior.
Farhan, did Mark Washington have to be relieved?
Yeah, look, I think they needed change, right? And ultimately, whether he had to be, I think Mark Washington's a good defensive coordinator. I think he's had success in other spots, like when he's been here in BC, and I think he's a quality coach and is going to rise again in that regard. I think the roster defensively is not good for this team. Tons of change in the secondary on a regular basis. Nobody knew who the linebackers were when the season started, and they just haven't been able to generate any kind of a pass rush, right? So I think he was set up to fail. With Scott Milanovic, he was never Scott's guy. We saw Scott change one coordinator earlier in the year, and then, they made the decision here with Mark. And there were rumblings earlier that maybe they were going to go to, that they were going to make some changes earlier, and then they moved him up to the booth, and then they kind of got him to simplify his packages, which is probably a good thing given the youth or the turnover in that back end. I thought that that it might take until next year before Scott hired him as his defensive coordinator. I felt it was inevitable, but ultimately Mark was never Scott's guy, so you might as well get on with it. And in terms of expectations for Chris, like, Chris hasn't had a good defense since 2015, right? Like, so it's been a minute, and we'll see if it looks different with him not having to wear the head coaching hat anymore, right? Like that might be able to allow him to focus and get better. But I think that the organization as a whole right now needs to step back from the idea that we got a chance to play in the playoffs this year, because they don't, right? So all the other 8 teams in the league do. The Hamilton Ticats do not. It's over. So for me, don't make a bunch of rash decisions and week-to-week decisions, right? Have a big picture lens in mind. Start to develop players, figure out who you can win with, and build for next year so that you can at least gain something out of the growing pains you've had this year. If they sit there and scratch and claw and try to eke out every win this year, they're not gonna gain enough out of it for next year, right? So in my opinion, I just hope that they give Chris Jones an opportunity to realize what he is as a DC, figure out of the 16 guys that are on the field for 12 spots this year, which 8 you can run with next year, right? And just develop and just teach and figure things out.
Farhan, wanted in Edmonton twice, wanted in Toronto, wanted in Saskatchewan, and clearly wanted in Hamilton. What is it about Chris Jones? What is it?
Yeah, I don't know. Black shades, black shirt, black pants. I don't know, right? But truthfully, I don't know that anybody else gives him this opportunity, right? So Chris Jones was wanted in Hamilton because he's got a relationship with Scott Milanovich. I don't know that anybody else hires Chris Jones. Noel Thorpe is a really good defensive coordinator. I don't know that anybody else would have hired him besides Danny Machocha, right? Where he was at that stage in his career, because he'd been through a lot of spots. There was kind of a reputation that while he knows what he's doing structurally, that players didn't like playing for him. But all of a sudden, now there's a completely different look around Noel Thorpe in Montreal. But despite that, and despite how good that defense is, one guy was going to hire him. And I think the same thing's here in Hamilton. So maybe he gets to, resurrect his career by having some defensive success, and maybe it can happen again under Scott. We'll see. Look, ultimately, this is going to come down to personnel, right? You can't make chicken salad out of chicken, what. So he's got to have better players if he's going to have more success. But, if he's aligned with Scott Milanovich and if he can build and grow. That was the hard part in Edmonton, right? They never got veteran. It was just a constant revolving door of players on the defensive side of the ball. By year 3, you should think that you've gotten better, and you should think that you're able to reap the rewards of all those growing pains of roster turnover and youth earlier. They never figured it out that way, right? So continuity wins, right? You need to play together in the secondary for a while to have success, but they just never had continuity. So if just keep Chris Jones away from any personnel decisions, right? And as long as the guys above him can make those decisions and create some continuity, you'll be fine. Because if you leave it to Chris Jones, we're still going to see a revolving door.
David, let's go to Montreal here. This team has been unbelievable right now. What's going on for the last calendar year with this club has been exceptional. And the fact that Davis Alexander has played so well as the third quarterback, now the number 1 quarterback. I'll ask you this. With Cody Fajardo, and we all know that the hamstring injury can be, you just sometimes you think it's healed and then all of a sudden it's tweaked. Do you just continue to roll him out as the number 1 QB until he loses a game?
I think it's still Cody's team at the end of the day. I think you got to make sure that Cody is healthy and all that, but I don't know if you want to put a situation where everything's going so well for your team that all of a sudden you're pitting maybe guys together. At the same time, though, you can't argue with the guy who's winning. So I think you have no reason to make a change until you feel like you have to, and that's gonna be the toughest thing right now for Jason Moss is gauging kind of how the locker room feels about it too, right? You don't want to have a divided locker room. You don't want to hear Cody Fajardo feel like he's being set aside for reasons that are beyond his control in a little bit of a ways, right? So that's just going to be a tough balance right now, but it's hard right now. Fans are excited because they're winning. They're not going. I don't think they right now care who's starting as long as they keep winning. But eventually, that decision will have to be made.
What do you do, Rosie?
I go back to what Farhan was saying about Vernon Adams Jr. and Cody's the veteran here. He probably has a lot of respect from his teammates in that room. I also subscribe to the idea that you shouldn't be able to lose your job to injury. And that's kind of what happened here with Cody Fajardo. It's not like he was playing bad before he got hurt either, right? That would be a little bit of a different story here. But at the same time, Davis has played really well. This gets down to the player relationships and everything that gets into keeping your locker room together. You have had such a good year so far. The biggest question is which one of these is going to make it so that everyone continues to pull the rope in the same direction. Because if you've got everyone on the same page, you've already got a heavy lead in the East. You can keep going for the second half of the season, relevant of who the quarterback is, as long as the locker room's all on the same page and the guy's playing well, then I would probably go down that route. I would give it back to Cody when he comes back, but now you know that you got Davis Alexander over his shoulder and there's no room for a slip up. Now, granted, Cody has not had any slip ups over the last calendar year. He has been very solid, but at the same time, you now know that you have another option here if you're the Alouettes, if either play slides or another injury pops up for Cody.
Farhan, there was a Bill Belichick move, was there not? I know you cover a lot of the National Football League, and Drew Bledsoe wasn't supposed to lose his job to injury.
Well, and a player that Cody Fajardo knows all too well because they were teammates at the University of Nevada is Colin Kaepernick. And
yes.
Alex Smith didn't need to lose his job. Mm-hmm. But Jim Harbaugh at the time decided we could be a good team with Alex Smith and we can be a great team with Colin Kaepernick. And I got to be honest, I think offensively, Montreal can be good with Cody and they can be great with Davis. So, but Jason Moss is fiercely loyal to Cody Fajardo. I fully expect Cody Fajardo to be the guy. But I do think that offense has a bigger ceiling with Davis Alexander. And if I'm not mistaken, he's at the end of his 3-year rookie deal at the end of this year. So you don't want to lose this guy. In my opinion, he's better. Like, he can push the ball down the field better. But and Montreal still found a way to win a Grey Cup playing a certain way, right, where they didn't require all of those things to happen, right? So they've won. So there's no reason for Jason to make a big picture change. He can go back to Cody because they've proven they can still win a championship that way. But I certainly believe the offense is better with Davis Alexander. You got Austin Mack coming back to that group, and when Tyson Philpott and Ken Julian Grant come back, like, oh my goodness, are they loaded in every way, shape, and form. That offense is loaded, and you'd like to be able to take advantage of all of it. But at the end of the day, it's about winning, and as long as Cody wins, Jason will stick with him. But I wouldn't want to let Davis Alexander out of that building at the end of the year.
I'll tell you, he's got a poise about him that is just it's obvious. And the way he leads let's be honest, going into Saskatchewan and the way in Saskatchewan, we're all riled up for that football game, and watching him operate in the final minutes of the game, boy, he showed me a tremendous amount. And speaking of the last moments of the game, Farhan will go once around on this: foot in, foot out.
I don't care. And I say this for two reasons. Number one, clear and obvious, right? And I want to get out of the nanosecond, microsecond replay, right? That's number one. And if one replay shows he was in and now we got to wait for the Zapruder film after the fact and, see something we didn't see earlier, I guess, but they lose that game because of 19 points given up on special teams, 4 missed field goals and a field goal return for a touchdown. So you lost the game because of your kicking game. And if we got to freeze it to that, not interested. Clear and obvious. Don't make it. Doesn't have to be the Zapruder film. Clear and obvious.
Matty, I listened to the post-game show out of Regina, and they were calling it a conspiracy. A conspiracy.
It's Saskatchewan, though. That's what they do.
That's incredible. It was an incredible play. Foot was in. Just another reason why the end of the CFL games are something that you can never turn off. I loved it. And I don't know, if I'm the opposition, I'd say play to the whistle would probably be another point I would make there. But, yeah, foot was in.
David, how about making a tackle? All three, right?
I was going to say, didn't have to get to that point. Give me foot in because they put themselves in that situation, Saskatchewan. Yeah, I think you're right. That game was not decided by that play. That game was decided by a lot of other things. And I mean, poor Trevor Harris, he deserved that victory based on how he played. And unfortunately, Saskatchewan felt like that was the talking point rather than how good your quarterback was and how the rest of the team kind of let him down.
Throw it the lollipop of this is the lollipop of the season on the CFL this week. Farhan, start with you. Jeremiah Masoli, like a feel good story of the season or what?
Yeah, absolutely. And moments like this tell you how close this league is, right? And just the outpouring of support league-wide for Jeremiah Masoli. Even people that had never played with him, you just hated to see what he'd been through the last couple of years, and when you go back to that Garrett Marino play a couple of years ago and just the venom around that and then what happened last year with the non-contact right when he gets back into the lineup, it's heartbreaking, right? And everybody felt it. So it's a close fraternity of players. It's a close fraternity of quarterbacks. And, just awesome to see him be able to win that game the way he did.
David, to you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been so I just had my heart has always gone out for him because situation's kind of beyond his control of not being able to play. And I mean, just to see him after the game take that moment on the field, kneeling down, and what that meant to him. Like, I think it just also shows how sometimes take for granted. People just probably just said to him, maybe it's just time that you hang it up, right? Just, it's a lot that's happened to you the last few years. For him to say, no, I want to keep doing it. And I think maybe just proving some people wrong that felt that he just couldn't do it anymore. That's what really did it for me is, him finally proving others that maybe doubted him wrong.
999 days between wins. Like, it just goes off David's point. Like, if any of us were like sitting on the bench, filling in, trying to do that for like half a year, I'd be serving, I would be filling grocery bags. Like, I would have been out of this career gonzo. And to stick with it for that long, you got to respect it, right? And I got to say, there was a couple of moments in that game where he's rolling out of the pocket and the Stampeders are trying to chase him down where I'm like, man, please don't go down. Like, make it through this game, please. That's all that we want to see. And then on top of that, he played well. He led his team to a victory. He was able to march the field in the final 90 seconds of that game and put his team in a spot to kick that field goal and win it. So I don't know how, covering the Stamps, yeah, you would have loved to see it go the other way. But at the same time, if it's Jeremiah Masoli out there doing it, one of those guys who, like you've all mentioned, is renowned around the league, one of the guys that's absolutely loved around the league, it was awesome to see. You always feel for guys whenever they get hurt because this game can be so brutal to guys like that. Like, you get caught, and that could just be it. The last we ever hear of you. But there it was out there balling out, and it was really cool to see. And I think a lot of people are going to be supportive of kind of the Red Blacks and just how the rest of the season can go for Jeremiah here. Certainly we'll be watching some of those plays when he rolls out or he gets tackled low with bated breath. But at the same time, it was really cool to see him get back and kind of grab that offense by the horns and run with it.
Yeah, I think that was the part of it too that just added an extra layer of appreciation for him. Is that not only did the Red Blacks win the game, but the fact that he had to orchestrate basically a game-winning drive before the game-winning kick there. Really outstanding stuff. So, number 8, good to see you back, brother. Oh, speaking of back, David, your guy, number 12, Chad Kelly is back. The Argos, are they going to make a run? What are they going to do? 2-quarterback system. What is your feeling that, and even more importantly, what is the Argonauts feeling in terms of having Chad Kelly back?
I mean, I think in front of the cameras, I think a lot of players will show excitement. I think behind the scenes, this has been a circus for a long time. This has been talked about almost every week. Some people, fans or whatever, asking when's Chad coming back? Is Chad coming back? It's taken an emotional toll, I think, on the team, this whole thing. And look, I think they're going to give Chad every chance to play. He's going to start. They're going to have that safe. Like, when you talk about 2 quarterbacks, that's more so if Chad just doesn't have it, you can throw in, Nick Arbuckle or something in there if needed. But this has been like, this isn't the type of return where everyone's kind of like rah about it. There are some people that has just been, again, it's been a circus. It has not, a lot of staff members, especially, like, I know that they've taken a lot of, they've had to wear this in a way maybe they shouldn't have because they weren't directly involved in everything. And so, it's exciting too because you're getting a quarterback back. I do get that. On the field, there's a lot to be excited about. The Argonauts have not had a quarterback really play to the expectation of that's been expected of them. They've been waiting for that MOP to come back, but it's really taken a toll this whole time, and it's going to be interesting to see how the fans respond when he's out on the field, because I don't think it's going to be a ruckus, full-out ruckus, based on what I've been seeing from fans online and everything.
Farhan, I know you talked to a lot of people around the league. What are you hearing
About Chad Kelly?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting to hear Ryan Dinwiddie kind of walk back that he might be the immediate starter, or like he's changing his expectations a little bit based on what happened with Nathan Rourke. But, in terms of Chad Kelly, is he the best Argos quarterback? Yep. Is the room conflicted about his return, to David's point? Yep. Right? I mean, he's not this isn't Vernon Adams, right, where you've got universal love in that room for a player. So, there are some of those challenges as well. But look, ultimately, winning cures a lot. And this team's been able to win with some pretty ordinary quarterback performances, right? I mean, they've won 3 games that I'm blown away that they were able to find a way to win, right? So they treaded water and got it done. And Chad should make them better. But you got to temper expectations and see where that goes. But I think league-wide there's a level of conflict around this, right? I mean, they wanted this is a last chance policy, and I think the league originally wanted to have zero opportunity for Chad to appeal. They wound up kind of giving in on that part of it. But, I think there are some concerns, right? And you just want to make sure that, with Chad and with his history, that he can, stay on the right side of it. And we're not talking about domestic violence necessarily. We're just talking about behavior on the whole, right? That you hope he can say the right things, do the right things, like he was able to do last year, and allow people to put this behind them all.
Matty, this is kind of it really is weird, because we should be celebrating the return of a MOP, a reigning MOP. But then you also think about, the stuff that happened off the field. You also think about what happened against the Alouettes in the East Final in a full house at BMO Field, and there's still so many questions, it seems.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm excited for his return in the same way that I was for Jeremiah Masoli's return. These guys were both off the field for very different reasons. One of the things that I've definitely learned about the players over the time, and the coaches over time covering the league, is that there's a lot of people behind the scenes that do a lot of hard work that never get the recognition, but at the same time have a lot of respect from the players. And I think that's where a lot of the conflict comes for a lot of the players, either in other rooms or even in that room, is that you have to respect those people. They're the ones that make everything click for you, and at the same time aren't necessarily getting the same pay or the same recognition. Chad Kelly makes them a better team. He's a better quarterback than what they have. But my excitement level for him to return to the CFL is minimal, if not nothing.
All right, guys, Rough Riders at Argonauts, Tiger Cats at Blue Bombers, Lions at Red Blacks, Elks at Alouettes. David Morassutti, the game of the week is.
It's got to be the Argos Rough Riders, and that's not that's not being a homer. That's just, I think everyone's eyes are going to be on that game just to see how Chad Kelly is in his return. And as you said, last time he played, probably arguably one of the worst games I have seen a quarterback play in a long time. So there's a lot of that goes into it too. But I think everyone's eyes are going to be on it for good and obviously not right reasons either.
Rosie?
I got to go BC Ottawa, just see what Nathan Rourke ends up being. That's another very good game. I think that a lot of people's eyes are going to be on that. But seeing what the second game for Nathan Rourke is like, and kind of seeing if the Red Blacks can maybe get a little bit of positive energy here and see how far up in the Eastern Division they can get, that would probably be it for me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Sask for Toronto as well. I think all eyes are going to be on Chad Kelly and what that looks like. Trevor Harrison, his return was really, really good. How does he, and that was against a very good Montreal defense. Toronto's defense is solid as well. So we'll see what kind of numbers he can put up. But the Chad Kelly factor is going to be what everybody wants to see, for good or for bad.
No doubt the quarterback questions, as we started off with, are just all over the place. But I'll tell you one thing, and I know I certainly want to see if Chris Jones has any effect, guys, but I'm really curious, Farhan, about the Blue Bombers. Like, I kind of am being reserved, but are they back?
I don't know, right? Like, I know it's easy to say, but I think their offense has a level to get to yet. Now, the good part for that offense is that they don't have to be overly aggressive because of how good their defense is right now, right? But the fact is that BC's defense is not very good. And, Winnipeg hasn't been able to run away from that defense at all in the previous 2 games. So, I think they've got a ways to go offensively. The pieces are there, but they haven't put it together. So, are they back? They're back, but as I like to say, they're back with a small b. If they want to be back, I got to see it in all 3 phases.
David, how much pressure is Brett Lawther under?
Oh man, BMO Field can be a tough place to kick with the wind and just the sidelines there. It's not an easy place to kick, so I'm very curious to see how that turns out too.
Guys, this has been outstanding. Thank you so much for your opinions, your candor, your education. It's been fantastic. I love the CFL this week because we can put together guys from all over the nation and talk about it. And I think, Farhan, you talked about it. This is such a tight brotherhood between the CFL, and you're a fan of not just the team that you carry or that you cover, but you're a fan of the league. So we appreciate your participation. Farhan, if we want to talk to you on social media, if we got something to say to you, where can our listeners and viewers catch up with you?
Farhan Lalji, TSN, either on X or on Instagram, same handle.
David, where do we catch up with you if we want some Argo talk?
You go to my X profile at @_Morassutti, 2 S's, 2 T's, as you can see on the screen here. And also at sportsnet.ca.
As I've been saying for about 3 weeks in a row, Maddie, I'm looking forward to this week because I don't have to talk about the Calgary Stampeders because I can't figure out who and what they are. But I do want to talk to you about it, so where can our fans do so?
Matt Rose YYC is the handle, Instagram or X, and the show is The Big Show with Rustick and Rose. You can get it on all your podcasts.
All right, guys. Hey, the CFL this week, just one example of the outstanding, informative, and in the case of Morassutti and Hitch, entertaining content that you can enjoy on the Ticats Audio Network. Link, subscribe, comment wherever you listen and watch your favorite podcasts. Please and thank you. Please and thank you again for watching us on the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil, and we'll catch you next week.